from Maryland to talk about the state and local tax deductions. And I thank the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee for his hard work on trying to articulate what is fair tax policy for Americans. Senator Wyden and I come from parts of the country with probably some of the uniquest tax codes. He doesn't have a sales tax in Oregon. We don't have an income tax in Washington. We are not an expensive tax state. We are not an expensive tax state. There are other states like Texas and Nevada and Florida that also don't have an income tax. And under this bill, those states and the citizens of those states, like many others, are going to be penalized. Middle-class Americans are going to have their taxes raised to give a tax break to corporations. So while we might want to discuss what is fair tax policy as it relates to the competitiveness of our economy, the good news for the people of the state of Washington is we have very competitive businesses, whether they're Microsoft or Amazon or Starbucks or Costco or Boeing. They're all working hard. They all are working in multiple places. And yes, they're all doing really, really well. The question is, do we need to reduce their corporate rate so significantly, and to do so, take money out of the pocket of middle-class families across the United States of America? The reason I mentioned Senator Wyden and the state of Washington, Oregon and Washington, is that because even though we have a unique tax code, our state's economy have grown faster than the national average every year since World War II. So that is to say that the uniqueness of our tax code has not hurt us. And yet in the state of Washington, we've had the highest minimum wage for a long time in the United States, and now we're raising it in various parts of our state. We have had a unique view of where our revenue should come from. So why now? Why now, after 100 years of tax deductibility by taxpayers in this country, why are you taking away their ability to deduct, only to give a tax break to corporations who are making record profits? After 100 years, why are you doing this? Well, I think some of my colleagues have said it best. They've called it double taxation. You are going ahead after 100 years and saying it's okay to tax the same amount that we pay to the state, that you're also going to tax that at the federal level. As one article mentioned, quote, Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist paper said the federal government might try to monopolize taxation to the entire exclusion and destruction of state governments, end quote from that article. That's right. Our founding fathers said, do not have double taxation. So for 100 years, we've protected the citizens of this country. And yet, someone over there thinking, you know what, I need $1.4 trillion. Where can I get it? Let's do it on the backs of middle-class families, because they might not notice until 2019 when their tax bill comes and they have a different equation. Now, I get my colleagues think that they have solved this problem by getting rid of the deductions and now all of a sudden giving you a double standard deduction. I've done the math. I've done the math for us in Washington State, and over 300,000 people in Washington will see their taxes go up immediately, probably paying anywhere from $750 to $1,000 more in taxes. Is that fair? And they're sitting in the shadow of these large companies who are making record profits and doing quite well, asking why are they the funders of this tax break? Why are they? And why are we getting rid of a policy that has existed in our country for over 100 years and penalizing them just to give this corporate break? Now, I can tell you, I don't buy the notion that this is going to trickle down to productivity and wage growth. I know what's driving productivity and wage growth in my state. It's a great, educated, skilled workforce. It is staying ahead of innovation, whether it's making software or new ways of doing business. And yes, it's a constant challenge. And those businesses tell me all the time, we need more infrastructure. We need more affordable housing. We need a better transportation system. We need better education. So they are very concerned about the ideas in this legislation. So you're going to tax immediately about 300,000 Washingtonians with a higher tax rate. And according to joint tax and other entities, probably by the time this is done, at the end of this bill, over 1 million Washingtonians are going to pay more money. So that is why I am so concerned, along with other states that have been fighting this battle for so long. Why now? Why now? What is the urgency that you are taking away the ability of my citizens to deduct their local sales tax, their property tax, and in the House case, other expenses, whether they're medical or education or their mortgage? So it is just beyond me when the middle class has suffered so much and has not recovered from the downturn in the economy that you think the best economic strategy is to take money out of the middle class taxpayer. Now, I want to enter also, for the record, a letter from the National Governors Association, from Governor Sandoval from Nevada. I mentioned they don't have an income tax. They are highly sensitive to this issue. And their letter says, quote, deductibility of state and local taxes have been a part of our stability, and they are about meeting the needs of our citizens. So the notion that we have the Governors Association, the home builders, the realtors, so many people concerned about this is falling on deaf ears, where I guarantee you it will not fall on deaf ears when the citizens have a chance to respond to this. The notion that we not only are taking away this ability to deduct, but we are also, in this legislation, making a change to the way inflation is calculated, what is called chain CPI. I'm not going to bother to explain the details to you, but I will tell you this. It will change your tax bracket, and you will be in a higher tax bracket. So they are pushing, besides giving you less deductibility, they are changing a formula and making you pay more taxes. This bill needs to slow down. It needs to focus on what will help our economy grow. And economists don't believe this bill is going to do much to help the economy grow. It is going to give those corporations money to pay for dividends. 75 to 80% will go to their shareholders, and those shareholders and the stock market will do well. What we also need to focus on is the investment that middle-class families need to stay in their home, to make education affordable, to pay for health care, and to have communities work. The fact that the Fraternal Order of Police is also against this legislation because of taking away of this local deductibility. It is like Hamilton said, why are you doing this at a federal level? I thought the other side of the aisle were the states' rights people. I thought they were there to protect the uniqueness of the tax code, to say that states have rights, to say that states ought to be able to decide their own future. Well, after 100 years, you're taking that away today, and you're going to hear from the citizens of this country who are upset that they have to pay higher taxes just to give these very successful companies a corporate tax break. Mr. President, I yield to my colleague from Maryland.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Maryland.
May I inquire how much time remains on the unanimous consent agreement for this amendment?
You may. The Democrats have approximately 6 minutes.
All right. $1 of tax to their state governments to help schools or roads in their state, and then they're turned around and taxed on that same dollar by the federal government. But that's exactly what this Republican tax plan is doing. Now, weeks and weeks ago, the Republican leader, Senator McConnell, and the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, made these public statements about how these Republican tax bills weren't going to raise taxes on anybody. They both had to publicly reverse those statements because in order to provide a huge tax breaks to the biggest corporations in this country, this bill will require millions and millions of middle-class families to increase their taxes. And the main vehicle, a main vehicle for doing that is by removing the deduction for state and local deduction for those citizens. I'm just going to give you some quick numbers, Mr. President. 100 million Americans today use the deduction for state and local taxes. In fact, half of the families in my state of Maryland use it. 38% of taxpayers making between $50,000 and $75,000 claimed the state and local deduction. That's 7.6 million households. 56% of taxpayers who make under $100,000 claim the state and local deduction, and 86% of taxpayers making under $200,000 claim the state and local deduction. Mr. President, it is wrong to double tax those families in order to provide a huge tax break for big corporations. And just to add insult to injury, the corporations in our state, they still get to deduct their state and local taxes. We just don't let the people in our state do the same thing. Let's pass this amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I'm here to support the motion offered by Senator Cantwell to speak out against a tax bill that is nothing short of highway robbery on New Jerseyans. This tax plan is about one thing. It's about cutting taxes for wealthy corporations and asking working families to pay for it. And it's especially bad for middle-class families in New Jersey, New York, Washington, Maryland, and other high-earning states that make bold investments in education, that drive the most innovation, that generate the most federal revenue. And don't let the Republicans fool you if they airdrop an amendment at the last minute that throws a few crumbs at New Jersey families and call it a victory. Carve-outs, caps, and exceptions are nothing but gimmicks meant to distract the public from what is really going on. No matter how you slice it, gutting or even limiting the state and local tax deduction is a direct assault on middle-class families in America's highest-earning, most economically productive states. By gutting the SALT deduction, Republicans will literally force millions of middle-class families across America to pay taxes on their taxes. In 2015 alone, nearly 1.8 million New Jersey households deducted a combined $32 billion in state, local, and property taxes from their federal tax bill. These families aren't living large. They're middle-class folks who had to work hard for every dollar they have. In fact, IRS data shows that more than 85% of taxpayers who claim the SALT deduction make under $200,000 a year, and over half make under $100,000 a year. So it's wrong to ask millions of Americans who had to fight their way into the middle class to pay more just so that big corporations can pay less. And rubbing salt in their wounds is the fact that Republicans let corporations keep on deducting their state and local taxes on top of the huge tax cuts lavished on them by this tax plan. If deducting state and local taxes is so important for big corporations that make billions of dollars each year, Republicans should understand why it's so important for middle-class families in cities and suburbs across America. That's why I'm offering this motion with Senator Cantwell to send the bill back to committee to fix this fatal flaw and restore the SALT deduction. If it's good enough for huge corporations, it should be good enough for middle-class families. Now, I've heard many of my Republican colleagues complain about the SALT deduction as if it's some subsidy for states like New Jersey, and that hypocrisy is just amazing to me. Far from subsidizing successful states like New Jersey and New York, the SALT deduction actually benefits the entire nation, which is able to share in the economic rewards created by the high-powered economies of states like New Jersey. And now, Republicans want to take even more. Well, we're sick and tired of it, and we want our money back. So I'll make a deal with any Republican from a taker state. Since you're so opposed to subsidizing other states, how about you take all of the extra federal dollars you receive beyond what you pay and transfer it back to donor states like New Jersey? Sound like a deal? I don't think so. Each and every year, states like New Jersey, New York, and Virginia generate billions of dollars in federal revenue that goes to Americans in less productive, lower income states that are more reliant, more dependent on federal spending. They are America's economic powerhouses, America's donor states, precisely because they invest in public education, law enforcement, mass transit, infrastructure, and economic opportunity for all. So it's no surprise that everyone from the Fraternal Order of Police to the American Hospital Association to the AARP support keeping the state and local tax deduction. Taking it away is a direct threat to the funding states need to educate our kids, keep cops on the beat, equip first responders and firefighters, and provide health care to the most vulnerable. All this just to give big corporations big tax cuts. If multinational corporations get to keep deducting their state and local taxes, there's no reason to stop millions of middle-class Americans from doing the same. And make no mistake, any reduction in the state and local tax deduction is a direct assault on America's highest earning, most innovative, most economically productive states. And guess what? All Americans will lose out when America's economic powerhouse states aren't so powerful anymore. I urge my colleagues to stop punishing success, stop interfering in state government decisions, and join me in protecting the SALT deduction. Vote for the motion to recommit. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Mr. President, we are about to embark upon a vote that I think will be historic, a once